going here. Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Walking Towards Prejudice. Thank you for joining WCAPS and the Institute for Global Negotiation for this interactive learning experience focused on communication, reflection, and engagement across differences. Today's session is not about having perfect answers. It is about developing the willingness and skills to engage thoughtfully with difficult realities, differing perspectives, and uncomfortable conversations. Throughout this workshop, we will explore how prejudice shapes interactions, how communication can either deepen division or create understanding, and what practical tools we can use to navigate these moments more effectively. We encourage everyone to participate with curiosity, honesty, and respect. Some conversations may feel challenging, but our goal is to create a space grounded in reflection, empathy, and learning. So thank you again for being here and contributing your perspectives and experiences to this dialogue. With that said, we'll shift over to our facilitator for today's session, Dr. Zaza Elsheikh.
Thank you very much indeed, Analia. That's very kind of you to introduce me. So good afternoon once again to all that are here. Hopefully some more people will trickle in as we go through. So you may or may not know that I'm an international mediator, I'm a faith leader, and I'm also a senior fellow for the Institute for Global Negotiation. I've been with them since last September, but have known them for longer than that. I'm currently in Boston, but I'm usually based in the UK. And my work is international. I spend most of my time outside of the UK. So I travel. Usually, I'm not in the UK for more than 2 weeks, 2 consecutive weeks. And I'm out and about. And so here I am in Boston for a week. So yes, the emoji response to that. So I really enjoy it. So let me get into what we'll be doing and the learning objective. So we're going to consider the link between stereotypes, bias, and prejudice. And I'm sure I won't be teaching you anything you don't know. It's just really a reminder, just to refresh our thinking about that and the part that we play in also ourselves having stereotypes about other people, bias, and prejudice. So that's how we'll explore the impact on us as well. Because there are psychological and physiological changes that happen when we encounter prejudice. And then the skills aspect of what we'll be doing will be reframing offensive statements. So let me introduce the sources of my insights. So as a child, you will see that I'm in hijab, but that I am physically clearly Muslim. In terms of my dress code. And I was brought up, born in or made and born in the UK. And then I was brought up from the age of 3 in Sudan. And I'll go into a little bit about why I think that's significant, because I was brought up in a country that was all black, so just varying shades of black. And religion was Muslim, but my mother was Jamaican, and so my mother was a very strict Baptist. So I learned the Bible as well as very little of the Quran. Very later, much later, I learned anything about the Quran, because the culture at that time, I'll give away my age, in the 70s, was very much that women weren't that much into religion. Yes, Muslim by name, may or may not be praying, etc. So not very practicing. And my own father just loved to have a scotch every night, and he loved a bacon sandwich in the mornings as well. So that's a kind of household where there was Arabic, English, Christianity, Islam, and the two cultures very different: Caribbean, Jamaican culture, and the Sudanese culture, which is African and Arab in terms of its culture and food. And then I came to the UK for my university and studies. I read medicine and I encountered Islamophobia. I was asked to remove my headscarf, otherwise, I would need to leave. I did consider leaving very seriously, but my parents wouldn't allow me because I was the very first person in our families on both sides to attend university. So that was my first encounter with Islamophobia. What had prepared me for it was that I also lived with my Jamaican grandparents for around 7 months. My parents were not there, so these were my maternal grandparents. And I encountered the worst Islamophobia I've ever come across. So, whilst they absolutely loved me, there was no question or doubt in my mind about that. They absolutely detested my religion and my religious practice. So I would need to hide to fast, hide to pray, even though I was in a loving home. So I think that's possibly where sorry, there's a typo here, where I realized that actually deep prejudice can coexist with love. So, as a medical doctor and lawyer, there's a lack of space there. Some people do call me a doctor lawyer, but first I was a medic. I did OB/GYN, and then I became a litigation lawyer in clinical negligence, or I think here you call it medical malpractice. I did that for some years, and there was torrid racism. So even though I became that lawyer, as a doctor, I encountered far less prejudice. A couple of people said, no, I don't want you delivering my baby. And I'd be like, okay, well, it's your choice at the end of the day. You'll probably need to wait for a lawyer and, you're in a high risk situation, but it's entirely your choice. I had that a couple of times. But as a lawyer, I realized the deep, deep, deep prejudice and racism, and we'll go into the difference, I'm sure you'll know. But there I had situations where I was told when I expressed concern about being the only Black person in the entire practice of around 320 lawyers. So I was the only Black person. I was not wearing the hijab then because I'd taken it off at medical school and didn't get around to putting it back on again, even as a lawyer. And various things were said, not so much about Islam, some things, but more about when I expressed concern about, going up the scale in my career, I was told, "Oh, but Zaza, you're not like other Black people. You're wonderful," and that was supposed to be a compliment. So it was really confronting in that time. Then, as a faith leader, a Muslim faith leader, I came very close, upfront and personal with Islamophobia, with the far right in the UK, who are growing even more now. But this was many, many years ago. There was an incident where a group called Britain First came to our mosque on a Friday prayers, and there were around 100 or so men, maybe 150 Muslim men who just come out of prayer. It happened to be a Friday. It was also the same day as the Parsons Green terrorist attack, which fortunately nobody died, but of course it was very scary. This was a tube station called Parsons Green. And they came to the mosque and they were trying to goad, trying to provoke. And I went up much closer than I would ever be with somebody that's not in my home as a man, up to this man to actually protect him, to act as a human shield from all the very angry Muslim worshippers who were being incited by the goading. So the goading was, it's always you Muslims, it's never the Hindus, it's never the Sikhs, it's always all you Muslims. You need to go back home, you need to stop Islam in the UK, etc., etc., etc. So they called me, it was being live streamed on Facebook, and they called me a smiley hijabi, which I was okay with. I can live with that. I know that they didn't mean it as a compliment, but I was okay with that. Then my work as a counterterrorism mentor, I encounter sexism, racism, and then obviously the different worldviews, because the people that I work with mostly are convicted terrorists who are now in the community, and my role is to work with neo-Nazis and with Islamists to try and brainwash them out of the radicalization that they got into in the first place. So it's very, very interesting work. And they're often, because my title, doctor, is gender neutral, they're often expecting a man, and then they get the shock. So yes, very interesting work. And then as a mediator, I've already mentioned, and just wanted to tell you this story as well, that I lead on the Windrush situation in the UK. You may not be familiar with it. It's generations of people who came to the UK from 1948 onwards. They were invited to the UK as British subjects. So the Caribbean, many other countries in the Commonwealth were still British, hadn't gained independence at that time. And they were invited to rebuild the UK, and they came on their British subject passports. And then several years later, after independence was gained, in the 60s for most of these countries, by 1981, a new legislation came out that said that you needed to actually apply for a British passport. And the explanations were very poor around that time. And so rather than explaining to people, look, you will encounter difficulty if you don't apply for a British citizenship, people just assumed, look, I'm a British subject, I came here on this passport, I've renewed it, I should be fine. And then they weren't able to access national health, so health service, education, and various other difficulties. Many were deported as well. Internationally, when I work as a mediator, again, the gender neutral and people not having done their homework sufficiently are also expecting a man. When I speak often, so for instance, this past year, I've been working in Pakistan. For every 6 weeks, I would be in Pakistan for a week. And there, every time a male colleague would say something, every time I would say something, they would attribute it to a male colleague. So I worked around that, and I'm pleased to say that within about 4 months, they had totally accepted me, applauded me, etc. So it worked out. So that's really why I'm interested in the stereotypes. So stereotypes are being those expectations of what, so those generalized expectations. They're very simple of what we expect a group or a mediator to be, what gender they'll be, where they'll be from, etc., etc. Bias is our internal driver, whether we like this flavor ice cream, that flavor ice cream, that group, another group. So it's that driver inside us for our preferences. Prejudice, of course, is when we now form absolute attitude. So it's a mindset. And there will be Black people who have prejudice against white people, vice versa, maybe vice versa. We've talked more about that. But there will be within Asian groups, there'll be a lot of prejudice towards other communities in the Asian group. So, for instance, Bangladeshis and Pakistanis was still 20 years later as a mediator the very worst dispute that I mediated between a Bangladeshi girl, a Pakistani boy. He wanted to marry her, and the family would not, his family, Pakistani family, would not accept it because she was Bangladeshi and so therefore not good enough, and because she'd been his girlfriend and therefore could not be his wife. So, different worldviews. Discrimination, as I know you will be aware of, is where some action is taken And I wanted to just talk a little bit about the stress that people might feel when they encounter different. So there's all sorts of hormones, the amygdala, the part of our body that sort of starts up the stress response, um, will be reacting. And what I wanted to also share with you is that perhaps the reason that I'm able to walk towards prejudice is because as a child growing up in Sudan, everybody was black, just various shades of black, but we did have white expatriates, so children at school with me whose family came to work in Sudan, parents were working there. And I was just intrigued by their difference, from me, and really curious, and felt completely safe to explore that curiosity because I was in the majority. Whereas my children who were born and grew up in the UK, their experience is completely different. So they are ever vigilant. If they go into a restaurant, they want to be sure, are there any other black people in the restaurant? On the bus, are there other black people on the bus, because they feel unsafe? Yeah. And for me personally, in 2023, February, I was on the underground, the metro in the UK, the tube, and I became aware that there were two white men who were saying some very unpleasant things about me being Muslim, talking about my group, talking about, group of Muslims, that they're horrible, unclean, various expletives were used. And then they threatened to behead me because they said that they wanted to seek revenge for the beheading of somebody called Lee Rigby in 2013, when they were in the middle of this tirade, this verbal tirade. They actually said, let's behead her, everybody. There were 30 other people on the train in that particular carriage, but nobody helped. And these two men were saying, let's behead her, let's behead her, let's avenge Lee Rigby's murder in 2005. And because of the work that I do, I knew, no, it's the 22nd of May 2013, but it's not the right time to point that out to them. Safety is the most important. So, yeah, these situations can lead you to be quite perplexed, whether it's the Pakistani boy and Bangladeshi girl, or indeed the situation on the train. So now I would like for you were promised that this would be an interactive session. And I've now been talking for around 15 minutes. And so now it's time for you to think about some reframing. And so, what is reframing? It's detoxifying offensive or shaming statements. So, the types of statements. You will have heard them. If you haven't, then other people that will have definitely heard them. So, the way that you reframe detoxify is to focus on addressing common interests. And you avoid using any of the words that have been uttered in the offensive statement. So, here's an example. So there are too many African refugees here, and our country is being ruined. Yeah? So I'll do this first one for you just to illustrate. So too many African refugees. So you're not going to talk about the African refugees. You're not going to talk about the ruin side of it. What you might choose to do, and there's no wrong or right answer here, but let's say there may be an ideal, and the ideal response would be, so the well-being or welfare of your country is important to you. Yeah? Can I have any comments on that? Is that clear? Is that unexpected?
I mean, to your point about reframing it, I see how that like it took the people out that they were, blaming for whatever's happening, and it just focused on them. So I am assuming that, and from personal experience, reframing is when we put it back on the person to say, okay, this is what I'm understanding from your statement about how you're feeling, not about external populations who are honestly beyond your control.
Yeah. And in the way that you sanitize it, so absolutely right, the way that you sanitize it is you look for the common interests. So the common interest there by the person who's speaking, actually, fundamentally, it's their country that they're concerned about. So going straight to that and focusing on that. And it's not that you'll never address, it's not that you'll allow them to continue insulting, 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 and just not address it at all. But to start off by saying that what I'm hearing is that the welfare or well-being of your country, success of your country, if you like, is a priority for you. And then they can't say no, or it's unlikely they'll say no. It's not. It's just the African refugees. Okay, so why is that then? I mean, you mentioned your country, so really moving the conversation to another direction and then saying how are African refugees impacting the country, etc., etc. Okay, so now one for you perhaps to try. So, white privilege is why you will never be able to understand me. So, this is over to you now. Have a try, don't be shy.
Can you hear me clearly?
Okay, would you like to try? Shakilia?
Yes, but I don't know if you can hear me clearly.
I can't hear you too well. Okay, she's muted. All right. No offers? Okay, well, you are going to have to do it at some
I
point. So
popped it in the chat
say that
and
again.
I said I popped it in the chat. I went for our backgrounds are quite different and thus create barriers for understanding.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah, very nice. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, good, good, good. Well done, Andy. Okay, so let's move on then. So now here are some that please, Analia, if you could create some breakout rooms, that would be good. I'll put these in the chat, or I guess we're quite small, so we could discuss it here. There's not many of us here, only 7. So let's do it here rather than breaking out then.
Okay, we
So,
can do it.
can you really face God? Yeah. So this one. What are you thinking of this one? Can you really face God when you are lying like this? That's so disgusting. So, what do you think? This is for you to do. I'm going to sit back. How would you reframe this one? So imagine it's a conversation, it's erupted, it's perhaps in a church setting. Uh, can you really face God when you're lying like this? That's so disgusting. So how would you reframe it?
To me, this one is a difficult one because it has several factors that are quite strong statements. It's assuming that we're facing the same God. It's assuming that the other one person knows that the other person is lying, and then it ends with an abrupt. That's so disgusting. So sometimes there's one or two of those in a statement. This is 3, so it's a pretty strong statement. But if I had to take a stab at it, I would say something to the effect of we all make our life choices, or we all make our daily choices based on what brings us peace, or what we feel is the best direction for us at the time. Um, it's assuming that they're using a higher rather than saying it. I think it's assuming that they're using a higher power is that standard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then yeah, I would just phrase it on we all make our decisions based on what brings us peace at the time with the information that we have that we consider to be accurate information.
Yeah, great, great, great. And a suggestion. So what you've said is brilliant. It deflects, it sanitizes, it talks about decisions, making decisions. One that I would suggest to you, Shante, would be so honesty is really important to you. I hear that. Yeah. So just completely avoiding the lying, the disgusting, but that is in essence what we're talking about, that
Hmm.
somebody, if there's an allegation of lying, and so it's honesty or saying the truth in a sort of biblical sense can also be triggering for some people. So just saying it sounds like honesty is really important to you.
Yeah.
Great, brilliant. Thank you so much for
Okay,
starting.
quick question.
Yeah.
For this one,
Hmm.
or for these, we're not reframing necessarily what they're saying to us,
We're
right?
not we're not
We're
summarizing.
we're adjusting our response.
Yeah, so we're detoxifying it. We're
Okay.
removing out the lying, we're removing out the disgusting, even God, we're removing. Forgive me,
Okay.
I'm just being
No, no.
theoretical here. Yeah.
No, I was definitely reframing the sentences that you were giving and not like my response
Yeah.
to the sentence. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not about me, it's about them. And I'm just helping them to have a conversation rather than an argument. So for me to be able to say to them, so it sounds like the truth is really important to you. I don't think either one of them, as I say, truth would be for me a little risky. So I would say honesty is a better word to use because of the biblical sense of things. Yeah. So it sounds like honesty is important to you. And I know because all of these are from real cases that she said, yes, absolutely. The same person that said this. So then we were able to move forward. What do you need to be able to feel that there's been honesty? What needs to be cleared up, and so on? Jada, please go ahead.
I had a similar example, maybe
Mm,
saying, I hear that you're hurt or disappointed, but I don't think judgment or disgust helps either of us. And leave
mhm.
it there.
Sure, sure, sure. Absolutely. Well done, well done, well done. There is an element in what you said which can make the speaker feel told off. Yeah, because when you say I don't think judgment or is going to take us any further, it can be perceived by the person who's just said this line like they've been told off or scolded in front of the other person. So it's just something to watch. Yeah, something to watch. And this isn't easy. I lecture on this all over the world about reframing and in violent, very violent contexts as well. So we're just starting. So please don't be shy to try. Thank you. Okay. You youngsters try to hide behind invisible disabilities because you're just too lazy. Yes. So this was the context of this was around ADHD. And yeah, so that was what was said, that these youngsters were not at school, they had private tuition, and then an elderly lady who they had been bothering, she had found there going to and fro on their skating boards just vile. She'd found it like that. And then she said to them, you youngsters, them and their parents, you youngsters try to hide behind invisible disabilities because you're just too lazy. Okay.
Think I have one.
Yeah, great. Go ahead, Andy.
Do you feel that when you were younger, you were made to do things even if you might not have had capacity to?
Lovely. Yeah, yeah. That really moves it on, because then that takes them to their experience rather than the youngsters. There's somebody in the waiting room. I'll just let them in. Takes them to the speaker's experience. So it's like a deflection, but it's a positive deflection. It's definitely not a negative one. So well done, well done. Shantae, yeah, go ahead.
Mine's not really a response, but just following what Andy said. Andy, I really like your response because I think it bridges the gap between the generations as well. And we know how the different generations talk about quote unquote the youngsters. So it's sort of acknowledging that for them. So very yeah, thanks.
The next one, thank you, Shantae. The next one we've done already. We've talked about that. Next one, these people are racist. That's why they don't buy from our shops. Yeah, so this was a Jewish person saying this about a community which was majority Muslim. These people are racist. That's why they don't buy from our shops.
I know this is not relevant, but like sometimes you do get caught up when people use the incorrect term. And so when you're like, oh, these people are racist, and then you told us that you said that the foundation of the disconnect was religion. I'm like, huh? And it throws me off because I think that happens a lot. And I know for me, I would get bogged down in, well, honey, they're not racist, or they're maybe they have a prejudice against your religion or something like that.
How would that
And
take
then
us further?
Yeah, but that wouldn't take us further. That would get us going back and forth about terminology,
Yes,
and a
yes,
lot of people get bogged down in it.
yeah, yeah. But it's very
But yeah, so
natural,
I
very
guess that's
natural. But
oh,
just
it's a trap.
share as well that Jews do complain of racism because they are a race. It's not about their religion. So they may be secular, entirely secular, have no leaning to Judaism. They may, on Yom Kippur, they may fast the eve of that, but other than that,
Well,
nothing.
but if I'm saying the reason they're not shopping is due to their religion,
Mm.
what in the once again getting bogged down in the terminology, anywho's irrelevant to the matter at hand.
No, no, no problem, no problem. We're discussing, yeah. So, what do you say then? What does somebody say? Come on, people who haven't spoken. Tazreen, Shaklia. I think Shaklia said that she had a lot of background noise. Shikani, come on. What are you thinking? There's no right or wrong here. Please don't hesitate.
You say something like, um, is your shop not doing well and you need more business? Like, I don't know, just to sort of figure out where they're also coming from, like maybe to change the focus to like
Yeah.
why they want these people to buy from their shops.
Yes, yes, yes. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So, it sounds like the success of your business is important to you. Yeah.
Right.
And he's not going to say, no, it isn't.
Hmm.
Clearly it is. And he might say to you, but it's yes, that is important, but at least you've got the yes to work with before you get into why the other party is not buying. Is it racism because they're Jews? Is it actually anti Jewish hatred? Which again is another form of racism in terms of legislation in the UK. Or is it that they go to synagogue, which would then be the religious side of things? So the Jewish context is a little bit more complicated, and it's because I've worked a lot in bridging those gaps that perhaps I have a bit more knowledge about how they see things, how Jewish people see things. So I would have been right with you, Andy, several years ago. I would have been right with you. What? Why have you said racist? They may be anti-Jewish, but they're not racist. But now through lots of education and awareness, I realized that, okay, you as Jewish people see yourself as a race, and so the hatred that you might experience, the prejudice, the discrimination, you perceive that as a racist attack or slur on you rather than against your religion. So thank you very much for that, Analia, as well. Women should not be allowed to speak in this meeting because these are decisions for men to make. So you may find it very difficult to believe that this comment was made when I was a mediator. I won't say which country it was in for fear of embarrassing them. Yeah, I mean, for me, I absolutely knew that they weren't including me in that, but they asked all the women to leave because obviously I'm the mediator, but quite an uncomfortable statement. And so yeah, let me hear from you and then I'll say what I said.
Well, just really quick, Kayla said for these people are racist. That's why they don't buy from our shops. Her reframe, which she put in the chat, is: have you engaged the community to determine the products you could stock to serve their needs?
Nice. Like it a lot. Very good. Excellent. Well done. Okay, so this one, thank you for bringing up the chat. I can't do too many things at the same time. So thank you for highlighting that. So women should not be allowed to speak in this meeting because these are decisions for men to make. So what do we need to remove from this? How about removing gender, removing women, removing men?
Are you feeling that your opinion on the matter is not being adequately heard? And Analia said, do you think decisions made here do not impact everyone?
Okay, so Analia's one could be perceived as attacking, but it's a very gentle way of arguing or countering what's been said. So I love it. I absolutely love it. Excellent. Well done. Okay, so the white privilege one.
Shakayla said, sorry, one more.
Yeah, go on.
Shakayla says, an inclusive environment has been proven to contribute to better decision-making and innovation.
Excellent. Very good. Like it.
And Shante says, I understand this space is important for decision-making.
Yeah, good. Excellent, everyone. Thank you for engaging in all of this. Okay, so now we're going to go to a case. This is a real live case, and I'll bring up the facts of them. And so I know you can all read, so I won't read it out unless you ask me to read it out. So have a read of that. Okay. And so far, can you see that Mr. Khan, who's the sole owner of Yum, has a chef called Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith had indicated that he was very keen to buy the restaurant from Mr. Khan, because Mr. Khan is wanting to move on to a property development business, which is going to cost him £1 million. So when he gets this very keen to proceed, from Mr. Smith, he thinks, okay, great, we're home and dry, almost there kind of thing. For this, he'll just need to put up a little bit more money or even get a mortgage for the rest. But Mr. Smith changes his mind. He's a strong Catholic. Mr. Khan is a Muslim. And he says, with what's happened, that he won't be able to get a mortgage because he cannot engage in financial transactions that involve interest. And so he's complained about it, and his solicitors have recommended mediation. So there's a shame of naivety. So this isn't talked about a lot, but I think you'll be aware that when people get scammed, this isn't a scam, but when people get scammed, they feel very ashamed of what's happened to them. And so here comes a statement that was made in this mediation. I treated you like a brother and I trusted you completely. But here we are. You've just proven it. You people have absolutely no understanding of honor. I should have known better. So, over to you. What are you thinking? Apart from horror.
So, Mr. Khan,
Yeah.
you believed that your relationship with Mr. Smith was developed to such an extent that his verbal, very keen, was enough for you to take out or to purchase a property development business.
Mm-hmm.
And because he has fallen through on that verbal consent, you are now feeling that not only have you been stuck with the bill, but the relationship you thought you had was not reciprocal.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love the reciprocal bit. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So going back to trust and, the wonderful relationship that they had, which Andy, you started off by saying that the development of the relationship was such a close relationship. Yeah, great. Anything in the chat?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if you're going to tell us how this mediation ended,
Okay. Yeah, I will.
but for myself, Mr. Smith not on the hook from my understanding of law.
Yeah. He
Shakayla
has the
says
right to change his mind. Yeah.
he does. There was no written contract,
Yeah.
or even a verbal yes. He had a very
Yeah.
keen.
Yeah.
Shakayla says, we built a business and served a consumer base on a common sense of honor and integrity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That doesn't really take out, is my view, doesn't really take out the toxicity. I understand where you're going, but I think, Shakila, it just needs a little bit more to be able to say something about, their relationship, because the business, yes, was built on trust, because I can imagine Mr. Khan saying, absolutely, it was built on that, but look what Mr. Smith's gone and done. No? What do you
She
think?
follows up with, a verbal contract does not negate my ability to change my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're trying to move away from the dispute in of itself. You're absolutely right, and of course that was highly relevant. But in that moment, saying, "Well, actually, Mr. Khan, of course, Mr. Smith could have changed his mind. That's not legally binding," is not really going to help him in that moment. Yeah, because in that moment, he's quite ashamed that he's been that naive, that he's proceeded with a big financial investment based on something that was very keen. Yes, there was nothing written at all. So how it worked through was it took me around, I think, 6 to 7 hours to resolve this one. Was because Mr. Khan's personality was very overpowering as well, but also to what happened was that Mr. Smith, because of the friendship, because of the trust, etc., etc., the way it was resolved that he did pay, even though he had no legal expectation to pay any money, he did pay £50,000 to Mr. Khan because he did blame himself for, not saying sooner or any of that. These were two friends, long-term friends for 20 years. And so yes, that really helped Mr. Khan to see that, what, actually you are like a brother to me, Mr. Smith, that even when no court in the land would make you pay any money to me, you decided to pay that money to just soften the sting of having to fall short on the next contract.
We have another comment from Jada. She says, I didn't know that our verbal discussion solidified our agreement. If I knew, I would have asked for more time to think.
Yeah, perfect. Very good, very good. So that really brings us to almost the end now of our session, because it's taken us half the time because we've got such a small group here. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask?
So I have one big question, and it kind of has to do with your career transition from working in the healthcare field to working in law and now solidifying yourself as a mediation professional. Which skills did you transfer between these spaces, and which skills do you felt like hampered you from fully being a part of these new careers as you were moving through them?
Okay. So, I mean, definitely I've encountered a lot of prejudice, definitely. So let's go to the skills. So transferable skills for me were communication skills. As a medical doctor, I needed to have pretty finely tuned communication skills because I was looking after two people at any one time, mother and baby. So really needed to understand that and hone those skills. I think it probably started from before that, living in two different environments. So knowing that in Sudan I was expected to be Sudanese, and then when I came to my grandparents every summer and every winter over school holidays, my Jamaican grandparents, that I was expected to be anything but Sudanese. So my grandparents were appalled by me eating with my hands. They were also appalled by me not being able to answer them if I was in prayer. Yeah, so there were just so many things. And so for me, fundamentally, the knowledge that deep prejudice can coexist with love was the lesson that I learned as a child. And I've taken this into my career. So as a lawyer, when I've been waiting at the court doors, just so inside the court building, now going into the particular court that we're assigned, and the client has turned up, I've said hello, I've been chatting with them about their case, and then they say, oh my goodness, there's only 2 minutes left. When is the lawyer coming? I'm like, but I've already told you I'm your lawyer. So there's things like that. There's been situations, Andy, as well, where somebody, this was back in 2010 when I took a case over the phone, which was the way that we did things then. It wasn't really Zoom in 2010. And the person spoke to me. Now it appears to me, because it's happened several times, that I sound white over the phone, and I certainly do not sound Muslim. And so the person it was a landlord-tenant dispute that was in dispute was about 100,000 sterling. And so the landlord said to me, Dr. Johnson. So that's another aspect, which is that my middle name is Johnson. And the reason that my middle name is Johnson is because my grandfather, my Jamaican grandfather, insisted on inserting his surname into my name as a middle name, so that people would be distracted from the Islamic sounding surname. So that was already the first bit of Islamophobia, that he didn't want people to know that I was Muslim as a baby even. And, years later, I thought, why would I want a slave owner's name as my middle name? Yes, it's all over, passport, birth certificate, all of that. But, so I use mostly just Zaza Elsheikh, but on official things, I would put Zaza J Elsheikh just to try and minimize that aspect. I'm very proud of my Jamaican heritage, but the link to slavery and so on and so forth is something that I don't obviously want to promote, but I'm very, very proud of my heritage. So coming back to this particular case, I went off on a tangent there. The reason that I went off on a tangent was that often when somebody is about to express their prejudice, they airbrush out my surname. So he said, "Good afternoon, Dr. Johnson." This is on the phone. I'm really pleased that I've caught you. I just want to give you the heads up, but that the other side, the tenant and his lawyer, they're Muslims. Now, I don't know how much experience you have of dealing with Muslims, but they can be jolly slippery. So don't believe a word he says. So he can't see me. And so I pause and I say, "That's okay, Mr. X. Don't worry. I've got plenty of experience of dealing with Muslim people, so I'll be fine." Yeah. And then he sees me the next day at the court, and he is very, very shocked. And I am very pleased that I have medical skills, because he looks like something is going to happen which will require emergency treatment, because he's gone from red to white to sweating, all of that. And now, fast forwarding, he says to me, "Look, the reason that we don't think you're the appropriate mediator is because this case is legally intricate." And I say, "Okay, is that your only reason?" "Oh, yes, 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 yes. That's absolutely the only reason. No other reason. We know you're the senior partner of your practice, so it's not about your competence. It's just, because we need somebody who's legally trained." I said, "Are you sure?" "Yeah, absolutely. That's it." "Okay, well then, as luck would have it, I'm also a lawyer. So let's proceed." And that case did settle, and he even referred another case to me some months later. So this is what encourages me to walk towards prejudice, because I did at the time, I will put my hands up, I did at the time say to my colleagues, "There's no way that I can do this case, because I don't want to jeopardize settlement by, obviously when he sees me, he'll realize that I'm Black, I'm Muslim, and all of that. So I don't want to jeopardize settlement. I'd rather one of my white colleagues does the case." And they all stood by me. All my colleagues were white, and they all stood by me and said, "No, you absolutely have to report this person, blah, 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 blah." I said, "Okay, fine, I'll do it." And yeah, and there we are. Hopefully, I was able to transform his stereotype, which is that they're slippery, because we did get an agreement, which was was a win for him as well as for the tenant. So a compromise was found, which they both could live with. and so on. And so that's why it's, for me, a personal mission to always walk towards prejudice. I love turning up in places where people don't expect me. So, for instance, going to synagogue at the height of tensions between Palestine and Israel, or now with Iran as well, and Lebanon. They're not expecting a Muslim woman to come in. I come in, I say shalom, I sit in for the service, I engage with them, and even said to them, I remember when I was in New York a couple of years ago, I went to the Park Avenue Synagogue, a beautiful, beautiful large synagogue. And I remember when they were saying prayers for one of the hostages at that time. Thank goodness they've all been released now. Sadly, not all alive. But one of the hostages was a soldier, and they said, and this person by the name, a soldier, they have a 3-year-old child. And then they said, and now we have a knitting class on Sunday. And I was like, whoa, that was such a speedy transition. I was praying for him, for his safe deliverance out of that. And already it was onto the knitting class. So being able to reach out over those barriers of prejudice is something that is a mantra for me. I hope that answered your question, Andy. I went through various aspects there. Please ask again
Yeah.
if there's an aspect that wasn't answered.
No, that was a beautiful answer. And I kind of wish I had asked it last, as it felt like a great closing question. But you're not off the hook yet. Shantae has a
Yes, I saw
question.
your hand come up, Shante.
And then we have one from the chat.
Mine is a quick one, and it references your childhood with your grandparents. And I wonder, were you an only child, or did you have a sibling that you could kind of share that experience with as you were going through it?
So I did have a sibling. He's now passed 4 years ago, but my sibling was severely disabled. And so he wasn't able to really engage with me on that. He was 2 years my junior. And that is also a trigger for why I moved from medicine to law, because I knew that on my dying, in my dying breath, that I wouldn't think, oh my goodness, did I do okay at work as an obstetrician, gynecologist? I would be thinking, was I a good enough mother? And so a life in OBGYN was very much full time, round the clock, carrying a lot of responsibility. And I preferred more of the 9 to 5. Of course, it wasn't always 9 to 5, but more so 9 to 5 of being a litigator, so that I could also be as good a mother as possible.
Hmm. Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Before Zainab, we have a question from the chat. It says,
Yeah.
how has your medical knowledge served you in health law or medical related proceedings?
Oh, very much so. So I will also be very honest with you that I'm very, very ambitious, probably competitive, if I was going to be very, very honest about it. Not treading on anybody's toes, of course, with all integrity. But for me, as a Black woman, what's really, really important is that I'm on top because of all the stereotypes. So, what I thought to do with my son, with the situation with my son with the severe disabilities, was that, okay, well, I'm no longer going to be in OBGYN and be the, very best that I can be, not best in the world, but very best that I can be. I can't do that. I've decided that I won't be doing that, but let me go sideways, so to speak, so that I know more law than the doctors who I'll be defending, midwives, dentists, pharmacists, so all the clinical professions. Let me know more law than them, and let me know more medicine than all the lawyers. So that's why I was recruited by that particular firm, where I was the only Black person there, let alone Black woman. Um, because they wanted somebody who was a doctor who could sort of slice through all the files, all the medical notes that were reams and reams and reams of paper in those days, weren't electronic records. And, fortunately, I was able to do that because of my medical knowledge. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Zainab?
Hello, greetings to you all.
Greetings, greetings.
Zaza, this is very inspiring, even though I joined late. But I think I can understand from the background that you are coming from. I think I have a similar story. We may not have the time to share everything, but as a Muslim growing up in northern part of Nigeria, I lost my father at the age of 3. And then I grew up without a father. I struggled to educate myself. A lot of prejudices, because there was this prejudice that a girl child is not supposed to go to school. You are supposed to get married at a certain age and then just produce children. So I can understand the prejudices. Mine is a struggle to educate myself. It's an educational struggle. So that is just my contribution.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I can also say to you, Zainab, that something that I could raise now is that, because this topic is so deep, we could spend a whole day on it, is how people adopt prejudices. So even though my mother was Jamaican, born in Jamaica, came to the UK at 9 years old, and then went to Sudan when I think she was maybe 24, 25 years old. So still very young, went to live in Sudan. Andy, you may be able to relate to this. Went to live in Sudan, completely different culture, language, religion, all of that. That very curiously, she adopted their prejudices. So she adopted the prejudice of northern Sudanese, which is now Sudan. So it was all one country until 2011. She actually adopted their prejudices. And so she was foul and petrified of southern Sudanese, who are very tall, generally speaking, very dark skin tone. And so when one day I was playing with a child, because my brother was brought up in the UK because of his disabilities, was brought up with my grandparents, Jamaican grandparents. I was brought up as an only child, for all intents and purposes. We would visit my brother twice a year in the UK. But I was playing with a child from the south who was living in the north in a shanty town, maybe half a mile away from where I was living. And I was 8, he was 5 years old. And so we're both very young children. And I was just playing with him one afternoon outside. And I said to him, when it was sort of time for lunch, I said, look, could you come upstairs with me so I can give you a lollipop? My father's bought me some lollipops. So I wanted to gift him this lollipop. And my Ethiopian refugee nanny, recoiled. So she's a refugee in Sudan because of war in her country. She recoiled and she said, he's not coming in here. And so I was very embarrassed, even as a child, very embarrassed, didn't argue with her, just said, can you wait here? Went and got the lollipops and brought them out to him, and off he went. And then when my mother came from work, she took the belt to me. And I just couldn't understand what I had done wrong. And she said that I needed to learn not to take such risks and not to bring such a risk into our house. So that was my very first encounter of deep prejudice that was entirely adopted, because my mother had been living there maybe 3 years at that time, 3, 4 years. Yeah, I think I was 7. at that time, but she'd adopted it. And you find this in the UK now, that many refugee communities are now anti-Black or anti-Muslim. So Eastern European refugees become anti-Muslim, Asian refugees can become anti-Black. And you may also know that within Black communities, so within Caribbean communities, it's whether you're from Jamaica, a big island, or a small island, such as Barbados, there's prejudice in that way. There's prejudice between Africans. Zainab, you may know this, that they may be prejudiced from somebody who's, I don't know, South African towards a Nigerian, or Sudanese towards a
Yes,
Nigerian,
yes.
all of that. And it's like, oh my God, what are we doing? What are we doing? When I've been to the passport office in the UK to get my passport renewed, on short notice because I was going to travel somewhere, the person who's at the desk processing the passports would be, very kind and pleasant to an white English person. And the person serving is somebody who's clearly African. I don't know which country, but visibly African. And the accent is also clearly African. And so he'd be really pleasant to the white customers, whether they're European or, in ethnicity, or English, native English. And then when it would come to me, it would be, yes, how can I help? Very, very brusque response to me. And I've had that in restaurants many, many, many times, in restaurants where I'm abroad with my family, and people around us are treated far more friendly than we are treated, even though we're in Egypt at the time, so Sudan and Egypt so close, but yet treated poorly. Incidentally, just on stereotypes, when I go with my family in an Arabic speaking country, or even in a non-Arabic speaking country, but in an Arabic speaking restaurant, such as Lebanese or any other Arabic speaking Syrian restaurant, they always bring my family members the menu in English, and then they say, oh, sorry, madam, and they give me an Arabic one because they don't expect me to be able to read English. So that's another stereotype. And I, again, in my reframing, say, oh, thank you, you've been so considerate to my needs, but could I have an English menu? Even though I can read the Arabic one, but just to, make the point.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting what you pick up when you move to different places. And I think it's just because it feeds on things that already exist, right? So the distinction between a South Sudanese person and a Northern Sudanese person is probably the same distinction that, to your point, is from, Jamaica being big island and Barbados being small island, and the discriminations and opinions that happen there, just transplant it into a new space. So I found my person to look down upon here. Um, and unless you're actively doing the work to not be that human, you will always fall into that accidental, just the way that we treat people in a way that says that they're somehow less than we are. Um, I do, and this is quite a personal question, but I'm just wondering because I know I have several, as a person who is in a mixed intercultural marriage as well as interreligious marriage, I know several people who have not made it. And a large part of the reason they haven't made it isn't actually the couple, it's the community surrounding the couple. So you've mentioned multiple times that your grandparents were raging prejudice folks. And so my one question is, how did your mom, protect your dad from that, if she did? And then two, are they, if they're still with us, still married?
Okay, so brace yourself, Andy. You're going to get a very honest answer. So their marriage absolutely flourished, thank God, did really, really well. Hopefully I'm a testament to that. But what often happens is that when people grow older, they start to polarize, they start to be more sensitive to what is going on around them and expectations around them. Because my mother was so welcomed, warmly welcomed into her in-law family, my aunts and uncles, so warmly welcomed. But in his late 50s, my father decided to marry a Sudanese woman, and that broke my mother's heart. So I hope that never ever happens to you. But my father's love for my mother transcended. It continued till her death in 2021. But she asked for a divorce. She wasn't going to be in a polygamous marriage because my mother didn't identify necessarily as Muslim. Um, and that wasn't problematic at all. That's her right, but cultural expectations would have been for her to become Muslim, but that had nothing to do with why he decided to marry somebody Sudanese. He just wanted somebody Sudanese in general who would be a bit more submissive than my mother, who would enjoy Sudanese music a lot more than my mother did and understand it. So yeah, those are also prejudices that there were prejudice around them. But what changes, Andy, to use the language of this session, is the bias. So the bias as people get older, and you may have seen it in communities here in the States, that as people get older, they may wish to be more with their Jamaican neighbors than their other neighbors, to talk about old times. If they're Moroccan, to be with their Moroccan neighbors and friends, that kind of thing, that there is a bias, which isn't a bad thing, but it's an internal motivator. It's a preference, whether you like vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream, not because of the color, but because of the taste. Nothing wrong with that. And so, yeah, people want to be with people that they align more with. And one of the aspects that we haven't spoken about is that the physical, we did talk about it in the case about the landlord tenant, but there's actual physiological harm when you are anticipating prejudice. So, not in my parents' case, but when, as a person of color in the UK, anticipating prejudice, which is what my children endure. Um, and there's many, and I'll bring that up on this last slide, many research papers that have been written on the adverse outcomes. And in the States in particular, the number, a disproportionately high number of men who've been incarcerated, who are in prison, who are of Black origin. There's a lot of impact, the belief in self, the self-reproach because of how others see you. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of psychological damage, and the physical is also that it affects your heart because of the hypervigilance, the heart racing more than, if you were in the same environment where you were the majority. Like I was very fortunate to have been brought up in Sudan. That everybody was just different shades of Black, and that was fine. And there were a few interesting white people there. So yes, a very serious point, of course, is the impact on us. And so that is another reason why I teach this particular topic, walking towards prejudice, so that we can try to mitigate those feelings, those impacts, those outcomes, those negative outcomes on our bodies, on our minds, so depression, anxiety, etc., by offering the opportunity for people to learn that you're not the stereotype, that the stereotype is actually proven untrue, whatever that stereotype is, whether it's that you're lazy or you're a criminal, or you can't be a lawyer, or you can't be a doctor if you're Black. For me, in my training, I was a medical student at the time, just about to graduate. and a little black boy who was about 9 years old of Nigerian descent kept calling me nurse. So I said, no, actually, I'm a doctor, I'm a student doctor. And he said, you can't be, you're black. And this is a black child saying that. So things have changed now, of course, thankfully. But yeah, for him, it's just not possible. He could not imagine that I could be a doctor.
Now I understand that those internal things that we keep with us, especially if we don't pause to do the unlearning, follow us, and they're very limiting in terms of what they allow us to believe. Okay, if there are no other questions,
I had a question.
Oh,
I
go
have
ahead,
two
Shayla.
questions. Can you hear me clearly? I know my background is
Yes, you are good now.
Oh, thank you so much. So I had a question, right? And I was just thinking through the question before I asked it. So you were talking about age-related biases, right? As you get older, you want to be secluded or sequestered to your own community. And I wanted to explore the concept in times such as these, as Black women or women of color, when we're in a state where, there's a rollback, in our right to be or transcend, right? Um, how do we remove ourselves from that, right? Or because I know it's different. We often need to be into community with one another in order to excel and to be renewed. But how do, in the times such as these, where there's hatred and there's vitriol and there's just, like I said, just hatred, how does mediation in the path that you've chosen, right, to walk towards prejudice? And we've always done that, right? You're in the tradition of folks before you. But how do we get to a point where we just want to continue doing that versus being sequestered to our own community?
Because if we do become polarized, sequestered, as you say, the risks are so much higher because for us, for those who are around us, for those who come after us, there'll be less understanding. So for me, where there is a far right protest, that's absolutely where I want to be. I want to go there for them to see that I'm there. Obviously, you have to choose it and have people with you to make sure that it's safe. And I wouldn't go to something that was violent. You have to be sensible about it. But going to those places where I'm just not expected. So, for instance, one example that comes to mind is that I was invited to an anointment at a Nigerian church in the UK. And I took my very close friend who was a practicing Christian with me. We were colleagues, and it was a lady at work who'd invited us. So we both went, and my colleague is white. As I mentioned, all my colleagues were white. And it was a Nigerian church. And when we came in separate cars. And, this is a huge, huge church, huge grounds and so on. So the ushers, they didn't say anything untoward to me. They said, welcome, sister. Good morning, welcome, sister, and ushered me through. And with my white Christian friend, they said to her, oh, why are you here? Who do you know? you know so even though she was Christian, again, these prejudices. And in terms of the leaning into our own communities as we get older, possibly it's also because of the stress of coexisting, of having to be hyper vigilant and so on, that as you get older you want more safety, less challenge. You just want to be with people who understand you, and where there's so much that is unspoken, so many references that are unspoken and understood. But there is a risk in that because then you get separate communities. And so that's a risk for that older person, it's a risk for us, and it's a risk for the people who come after us. So walking bravely and safely into places where there's going to be significant prejudice is something that I highly encourage.
Apologies, I had to take my headset off. Wonderful. Yeah, that was a wonderful ending point. To continue to walk towards prejudice, right? But it's often draining, as we all know, right? But it's not necessarily to move humanity forward, right? and engaging in diplomacy as such as what we're doing currently is, one of the ways as well. So thank you so much.
And take a colleague with you, for support, to be able to share what happened. Because a lot of the incidents that have happened to me, like, for instance, when I was a lawyer, being in an event, the practices event, so it was a promotional event for their clients. And I was suited, wearing, very smart clothing as I would. And one of the clients asked me, I poured some orange juice for him, being hospitable as we were meant to do. And he asked me for my business card. So I said, oh, I just joined 2 weeks ago. I haven't got any cards yet. But, if you go on the website, you'll be able to find my details. And he said to me, oh, okay, because, the catering here has been great and we really want to use your service at one of our own events. So he just could not imagine that I could be a lawyer there. He assumed that I was a caterer and that when I said to look on the website, that I was referring him to the catering website. So yeah, I find it fun. I don't want to be dismissive or anything. I find it rewarding to be able to, fun as in amusing, the types of things that I said, but then of course it is a serious matter. So I find it rewarding to be able to dispel those myths that, I don't speak English, for instance. People who see me without me having spoken, they assume I don't speak English. And so when they ask me for directions, for instance, if I'm in the UK, asking me for directions, and they say, do you know where the train station is? And then there is the pallor where I say, oh, yes, absolutely, it's down there, So, yeah, it can be real fun. Obviously, you need to be very careful. You need that support with you. So please take a colleague with you if you do decide to venture walking towards prejudice. You know that you are doing it already on an everyday basis, depending on your work, you're doing it already. This is just more of an intentional walk towards it rather than turning your back. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, I did have one last question, so I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm sorry if I'm keeping people longer. The second question I had is from having a clinical background, what perspectives do you believe that those who have clinical backgrounds or STEM backgrounds can bring to the field of law? Because you're saying that you've been able to make this momentous impact and how you engage in, your interreligious leanings, how that has informed it. But how impactful can that be? And what is your hope for your legacy? That's what I was saying.
Okay, that's a big question. So my hope for my legacy is exactly what we've been talking about, that whilst acknowledging that there are deep, deep, deep prejudices in the world today and that polarization is growing rather than diminishing, that there still is a way of encounter, a safe encounter that gives the opportunity for people to change their minds, like the gentleman who talked about the slippery Muslims, and then he actually referred a case to me. And then in terms of the clinical background, I think I'm very, very blessed to have a clinical background. It gives me confidence that wherever I am, whether on a plane or elsewhere, that I will be able to help, even when people are ill and desperate. Usually they don't care about who's treated them. They just want to get better. And so I have had situations where people have said, that marvelous Muslim woman who treated me, that kind of thing. That's been very, very satisfying, that they've realized, oh, actually, she's Black. Oh, she's Muslim as well, but she treated me and I'm better now from whatever it was. Because before OBGYN, and, after that, as I say, just on a casual basis, when I'm walking around and something happens to someone or on a plane, treating somebody. So that for me, it's been enormous. And in terms of the legal field, I think I mentioned earlier that it helped me to really distill complicated cases very quickly. So if you're minded to do the same, that would be great. Lovely to hear from you if you wish to talk about it further.
Actually, I am. I'm actually applying to law school within the
Okay,
next year. And I have a background in cellular molecular biology. So
okay, great.
um that that was my thing. But thank you so much for answering my question, and thank you everyone for being patient with my questions.
Okay,
No,
great.
those are wonderful questions to ask. Zaza, we'll pass it to you for your final closing and then over to Analia to end the event, if there are no more questions.
All right.
Okay.
So okay, no more questions. And in terms of closing, I think I closed already, but just to say that it would be absolutely wonderful for my legacy, for the world, more importantly for the world, if you were able to take forward some of the stuff that you've heard today and to think about spreading the message to other people. There's lots of references here. Can you see the slides? The shame, bias, and prejudice. Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see them.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So there's some references here that I would encourage you to have a look at. Please be in touch. Andy has my email address. Very happy to help. I know that WCAPS is doing exceptional work, and I'd be very happy to do further things with WCAPS and to look at ways to spread this message and actually help people to do it, because I do it for a living. I'm mediating, all the days that God sends, whether as a commercial mediator or a family mediator, for so divorce and intergenerational stuff. And you'll be able to read these cases, a number of the cases, not the one that we looked at today, Mr. Khan and Mr. Smith, but other cases, if you wish to, are in Inviting the Elephant into the Room by Katrina Abatis, and also work by Professor James Gilligan, who's American, about what shame, which we've been talking about prejudice, and of course, prejudice can make people feel ashamed, and that's how the self-hate, self-approach gets in, and what the link is between shame, guilt, and violence. So thank you very much indeed for your attention today, and I look forward to seeing how this progresses. Thank you. Over to you, Analia.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Elsheikh, and especially for sharing those resources as more places that we can, follow up and continue to build on these skills that you shared with us today. So with that said, as we conclude today's Walking Towards Prejudice workshop, we want to thank each and every one of you for your openness, participation, and the thoughtful engagement during this session. The conversations that we explored today are ongoing, and building these skills to navigate prejudice, bias, and difficult dialogue requires continuous reflection and practice, as you have illustrated. Whether in professional spaces, academic settings, advocacy work, or personal relationships as well, as we've seen from some of those examples. These moments call for intentional communication, active listening, and of course, as well, empathy in the face of sometimes a bit of ugliness, right? So we encourage you to continue identifying opportunities to apply the tools discussed today, especially reframing, reflective listening, and constructive engagement across differences. So on behalf of WCAPS and IGN, thank you again for contributing to this important conversation and for supporting spaces that promote learning, inclusion, and meaningful dialogue like this. Thank you all, and have a really, really great rest of your day, wherever you may be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eid Mubarak for all those who are celebrating.
Mubarak, thank
As
you.
well.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. This was wonderful. Look forward to seeing a couple of you in a few short weeks.
Yes.
Okay. Bye. Bye for
Bye.
now.